You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo for another edition of this week's Long Island News, the news show that brings you news stories about Long Island and about Long Islanders. Hello to you. We have a great guest today. We're very happy to be joined by Town of Hempstead Senior Councilwoman Dorothy Goosby, who has represented the 1st District, which consists of Hempstead, Lakeview, Roosevelt, as well as portions of Baldwin, Freeport, Lynbrook, Rockville Center, Uniondale, and West Hempstead, since she was first elected to the town board in November of 1999. Well, hello to you, Councilwoman. How are you?
I'm fine. It's a good day today, huh?
Yes,
It's a beautiful day. Thank you so much again for joining us. We really appreciate your time. For some of the listeners, especially ones, maybe the college age, but, our listening audience kind of skews the gamut. But the point is, maybe we want to talk a little bit more about how we got here, how you got to be honored that day. And I know it starts a lot with the class action lawsuit that you were initially a part of that eventually wound up in, restructuring the whole kind of Town of Hempstead, council that said. So can you let our listeners know, again, a little bit more of the backstory on how we got to this point?
Well, first of all, we did file a lawsuit in 1988, and there were several of us on it at that time. But in the end, there were only 2 left, and I'm the last living person who was involved with that. But we did it because at that time, African Americans and Hispanics didn't have anything as far as government was concerned. We weren't able to elect a person who looked like us, who lived where we lived, and who would be able to understand our problems and needs. So Fred K. Burrington, which I'm sure you know, who is a very famous lawyer and still a great friend of mine, was the one who decided that we should do something about it. So in the end, I become Goosby versus Town of Hempstead because only 2 of us would kept us up there. At that time, we were offered many things, money, positions and so forth, but it wasn't that important to me because of my background and where I grew up. So we went ahead with the lawsuit. And finally, in 1999, after going through central court and so forth and so on, we went to the federal court. The last one was the court in the United States of America, the Supreme Court. And they ruled that the Town of Hempstead had to be divided into districts. And from that, we end up with this legislature that we have now, the way it is in Nassau County. And there are 150 cases now based on that lawsuit. I didn't know that until Fred told me the other day.
Wow.
But it's being utilized in 150 different areas in the states of the United States of America.
That's amazing.
That must feel good. That must feel really good. Well,
it feels good to me because it's important that people have the right to vote, and we all have a right to be able to live where we live, the way we want to live, like others.
Yeah.
Everybody should be the same. As I believe in this is a country. This is our United States of America. And I think we're all one. That's where it should be, but it's not.
That's something that's definitely music to our hearts, and I'm sure plenty of our listeners, in terms of trying to have the cooler heads prevail and work on the issues that affect everybody, of course. But in terms of in addition to that lawsuit, which of course now is precedent and has probably made a lot of difference in a lot of other places, you also had an interesting background before public service. So it seems that you had a number of degrees, some from local colleges. Adelphi University and Hofstra, and you were apparently a New York State registered dietitian and even got a chemistry kind of teaching certification at Hofstra. So can you talk about how that kind of played into, how you then got into public service later on?
Well, I tell you what happened to me in my life. I was born in a little place called Apalachicola, Florida. And, we had a service here where Senator Schindler came and he spoke and he started speaking about me as a kid. I didn't know that he knew that I had completed high school at 16 and was belle of my class. So it was real hard during that time because, we had colored and we had white. And so I did attend college at Florida A&M University in Tallahassee. That was really something to do. I worked my way through most of the time. I did come to New York during the summer to work. because I needed to earn money for books and so forth. And from there, when I graduated from Florida A&M, I wanted a job. I could not get a job. The only job was offered to me was that of a maid with a BS degree in Foods, Nutrition, and Institutional Management. So I did write to New York State Nutrition Department, and I was able to be hired as a dietitian. So from there, I went on to Columbia University, Cornell University in New York Hospital. And I did an internship there. From there, I got married. And during my marriage, I decided I wanted to go back for a master's degree. So I went to Delphi. And I completed my degree in foods, not foods, but in management, business administration, and also labor relations. From there, I went to Hofstra, and I did come to Nassau Community College for 2 courses. You had to learn to speak a language. So I came to you for that.
Save some money.
Yes. And then I completed my degree, my student teacher at Hofstra. So I earned my degree to be able to go and teach chemistry. So I passed that exam. So I am a licensed chemistry teacher. Wow. And so that was part of what happened. But it was not easy. I did that with kids and trying to work. And then this lawsuit was really hanging on me because I had my own little business. But because I would not get off of that lawsuit, I was fired from a couple of places. So then that's when I decided I wanted to teach kids because I wanted them to be able to grow up and know what they can do with their life. It's important that you stick to what you believe in. And if you work very hard, people try to help you because there are many people that you don't know that will do this. And of course, I am a person, it doesn't matter to me what party I am, as long as I work with people who will do what is necessary for all of us. And I've had that opportunity working here. I've had bad opportunities with my own party. I don't want to talk about him because people believe in him, but I'm trying to pray that I can forgive him for what he did to me, but I have not been able to do that because I was in court for 3 days,
Wow.
being sued because I spoke up, and you're not supposed to speak up. That's not something that I could do. I could not do, especially since I was raised in the South doing segregation where you couldn't speak, you couldn't do anything you wanted to do. But I enjoy working here. I've really accomplished a lot. When I first came here, African Americans were always working part-time, never full-time. I worked on that. Now, everybody, if they pass, go through whatever they have to do to make sure they do well, they get made full-time. As a matter of fact, we now have, which you never had before, we have 2 African Americans who are now commissioners. In a sense, they started off, as a deputy commissioner, and I'm sure they're going to move on because these are good people who work very hard in this town. So those are some of the things, and they get good benefits now as other people are. They're treated the same as others, and if they're not, we have people here that will really look into that. And I have to say, I'm working very well with all of my board members, and Don is wonderful. Whatever I need, I get it. And I ask for a lot because our parks were terrible. Now I have only 1 park left that I want to make sure that I work with, and that is going to be okay. The rest of them are doing well. So I'm happy.
Definitely, it's good to hear, and I think there's a lot of inspiration that folks can get from knowing, in your kind of story and seeing the adversities that you faced, and overcame, and like you said, still persevere and continue on doing good work in the town of Hempstead. And last week we actually did speak with your colleague Anthony D'Esposito, another council member, and obviously he speaks very glowingly of you, as well as the the town supervisor Don Clavin, who we've also interviewed a number of times, and the other members of the town of Hempstead that we've spoken to. So certainly, like you said, even though I know the kind of party lines are a bit, well defined, we'll say, in the town of Hempstead, that still it's good to see that regardless of that people are working together to make, the community better. And now segueing to that point, I know you spoke a lot about infrastructure in the past and the need, like you said, to have, parks that people want to enjoy, especially in the pandemic and, in that light. But I guess, we spoke with the councilman last week in terms of the budget, but also some of the money that, is going to be coming, to the town of Hempstead. I know a lot of it came from the CARES Act and other kind of federal funding, but I saw saw that there's a nice amount that's going to be going to Long Island Cares and food insecurity issues. So do you want to talk about, again, maybe the budget and some of the issues like Long Island Cares that, deserve that money that you've seen, do good work over the period that you've been here?
Well, that's been very important to me. Of course, before any money is spent, we all have an opportunity to speak. We make sure that we vote on it. So I'm very concerned about people who said we're not using the money properly. I hate to hear that from my own party because I'm sitting there and I'm voting. And I do vote, to make sure it's done. When we started out with the CARES Act, I was able to use at least 3 areas in one area that I knew that truly needed food. And so I put in for that, I got it. And the other area, I needed 2, I got them. And there's another area I needed 3, I got them. So everything that I've needed as far as feeding our people that I know that needed and getting in places to do it, I've just tell us where you need to go. And I've done that. So we have fed millions of people. And not only have we used it in that manner, we're the only ones. My district has been the highest hit when it comes to COVID. And even I myself had COVID when it first started out, right. So I recovered. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody else was treated the same. So when D'Esposito Anthony came up with the idea of buying a vax machine, so we bought it. And I voted yes, because I wanted to make sure it came into my district first, which is the highest hit one of all. And of course, the first place it came was Uniondale, which is in my district. So we've been doing that, and we have more than 7,000 people that we have vaccinated by going from place to place. And so we've been doing that. In addition to that, we have a wonderful doctor. His doctor is Dr. Newman. I call him Dr. Dave.
Yep. Oh, yeah, we know Dr. Dave.
We know Dr. Dave.
Yep.
So Dr. Dave has worked with the state. And in working with the state, he has a truck now that he can go into anyone who needs it. If anyone calls us and let us know that there's a senior in the home who needs this, needs to be vaccinated and they can't come out and so forth, he goes in, he has a crew that he has trained, EMSs, and they go in and they vaccinate those people. So that's another, area that we do. In addition to that, I've had meetings here at Town Hall with the ministers because I want our ministers to become involved. If they become involved, then they're teaching people in the church, because a lot of people here pay attention to ministers, then they can help us with this. So those are the kinds of things. And since I worked in healthcare for over 25 years, it's extremely important to me that people who need it get it. So that's important. And last thing we've done, we're doing things to help the Girl Scouts. I am a lifetime member of Girl Scouting. And so I know how important it is to make sure that girls get skills. So we just bought you the band with some of our CARES money in order for them to be able to go into the various communities and learn the skills, because we want to make sure that they understand, which they are doing very well. They were able to do a lot of things, thinking about it, excuse me, during the pandemic, which has hit all of us very hard, which is something that we've had to work with here at the town. And again, that's my favorite doctor, Dr. Dave, who has been very much involved with that. What we did was we had an A group and a B group. And the A group would work. When they worked, then the B group was off. And then we switched it around that way. That was all Dr. Dave coming up with this. So we could keep everything going. We didn't stop anything for the residents. They got that garbage picked up every day. Every time it was needed to be picked up as on the schedule. And anything that was needed, we still did it here in the town of Hempstead. So I'm very proud of that. And it's something that our residents needed. We didn't skip anything when it came to all the licenses and so forth that they needed from the clerk's office. That was done. We had little, what you call them? Can you call them vans? But it's like a trailer outside, the mobile units. So those mobiles were outside and they could come and still apply. They still got married. We had many weddings here. Yeah. So that was done.
Oh, yeah. We've talked to the town clerk, Kay Murray, about doing those digital weddings.
You guys didn't skip a beat.
No, we didn't. And, we still gave out the passports, and anyone who had something to do as far as the building department was concerned, they were able to come here right outside the door and do that, virtually as well. So everything went on very well with the cooperation of all of our staff. We have some wonderful people here. They work together with all of us. And, and fortunately for me, there's not one commissioner that I can ask to do anything who does not do it. So they even bring me coffee in the morning. Can you believe that?
Man, you're an institution when you got the commissioners, bringing you some coffee and asking you how much sugar, I guess. So that is great. Let's remind our listeners that they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully still joined by Town of Hempstead Councilwoman Dorothy Goosby from the 1st District. And that certainly is important. And like you said, you having been such an institution here, know those players. We've talked to the other folks that I've mentioned before, and even the county executive and Dr. Larry, for example, from the county's kind of Department of Health, about knowing the folks who have been doing that good work, whether it's on HIV or whether it's on a different kind of public health issue, and they're the ones who had to kind of adapt and help the towns and the municipalities deal with the pandemic. And like you said, seeing everything kind of transition to remote so that things could at least try to function the best they could. It's certainly from garbage up to passports, that's a big kind of range of services. So we know constituent services is kind of the backbone of public service, but that's great to hear. I know we spoke about that again with some of your other colleagues. So Bill, I know there's probably some other things we wanted to also mention. I know we talked also with again Anthony D'Esposito about the Narcan trainings and opioid abuse and dealing with those. So I guess if you got a question on maybe one of those matters or your thoughts.
No, I think the Narcan thing I think it addresses a really good issue, because a lot of people that have a negative reaction to that. Well, why should you help those people? People who are either addicted to opioids or have OD'd or whatever. And, I think this is a great example that if someone's suffering, we need to do something to alleviate that suffering. We don't need to take their inventory and find out, it was the old story. I think a pastor gave the sermon in the church. A guy was robbing a building, and when he exited, he got stuck in the chimney. And he asked the congregation, well, so as the firemen arrived, what do you think they should do for the guy in the chimney? And of course you had people, well, it's his own fault, all of these opinions, until the one little kid stands up and says, the guy's hurting, you got to go get him, and you got to help him out. And I think that Narcan thing is exactly that, and it touches a point for those people who haven't quite evolved to the point where it doesn't matter who it is. You've got to you have an obligation as a human being to do something.
Social contract.
Yeah. Exactly.
Exactly. We really have to get there, and we have to get there collectively.
Definitely.
The councilwoman, I just can't believe how busy your life has been. You've gotten degrees, you did all of these things. I think that really is a great example to your constituents and their children to see someone like yourself. Hey, this is what I have to do, and that's what I'm, and you're doing the right thing. I thought of George when you mentioned that, you were offered quite a few things to back out of your case. It's going to sound strange, but I immediately thought of George Washington. And I thought if he hadn't been the first president of the United States, we would be a kingdom, because he refused to be a king. The people wanted a king. And he said, no, my term is over. I'm going to leave, and you're going to vote for somebody to take my place. And if he hadn't done that, I don't know what the trajectory of the United States would have looked like. I really don't. And you represent that same thing. You have the guts to stick to your guns and look what you did,
Listen, I had to, because first of all, as I said, when I grew up, we were treated differently. The books that we received from the schools, from the white kids, they were all torn and shattered. They would not allow our teachers to teach us chemistry or teach us. I had never had chemistry before I got into college. But, you just might have heard of him, Fred Humphreys, who was president of Florida A&M and president of Tennessee State, died recently. So when I got there, we helped each other. He said to me and the other guy, Dorothy Goosby, Dr. Macmillan, you're going to learn this. Come up here. And they worked with me. So I ended up not knowing anything about chemistry, but ended up earning 36 credits in chemistry. Wow. So in all of the sciences, and some of our teachers would take us out into the woods and show us what algae was and and all of those things that has to do with nature. That's how we learned that, because we didn't have any books for it, nor did we have labs. And so I knew what I wanted to do, and I just want kids to know, if you really work hard, you can do it, and I do help them. I even have an orphanage that I work with. I'm on the board in Kenya.
Wow.
And what we have done with those kids, I can't. I just, every time I think about how well they are and how well they're growing. I spent 3 weeks there, and they named one of the kindergartens after me. And since that time, we have grown. We have buses for them. They have uniforms. And if you could see them and see how well they've grown and how well they've done, then sometimes I get teary, because they have.
Understandable.
Really, and when we took books, that someone gave me a lot of books that we took over there, and I'm reading to them. They couldn't understand English, and I couldn't understand what they were saying, but they took those books from me, and they got in the corner, and they used to see how they just loved those books. So
wow. The passion.
Anybody can do it. I've had many kids when I first came here who came here as interns, and those young people have done so well. Most of them now have their own businesses, and they're helping other kids as well. So that's important, and you spread it out. And I think that's what the Lord needs for all of us to do. That's what we need to do. And that's why we work so hard here at this town. They work with me because they don't want to hear me.
That's fair. No, fair enough.
Oh, yeah. So I don't. But,
boy.
He says that because he just teases me.
No, of course. But no, that certainly is an amazing, again, additional piece of information. And I think that really speaks to the fact, and maybe we can get your thoughts on, in the time that we have left here, things like, physical infrastructure we spoke about, but social infrastructure. I know that's being talked about a lot at the federal level with the, budget and the discussion around, the different fundings of different programs on that level. But what can you say, having been on the ground, having been the one that, has seen all these, like you said, intergenerations, even internationally to an extent, kind of, really be able to kind of excel because they got the resources that maybe weren't previously available to folks in their kind of similar situation. What would you say the importance is to maybe the Congress members, even from our delegation on Long Island?
What I would say to them is just remember who you are, who you're there for, and the people that you actually serve. Many of them that have never been here to visit with us. I know now there's some things we need here. Think about other people as you think about yourselves. We have a problem here in this village, and it has to do with water and sewage, which is a very important problem, because if you don't take care of that, then the water is becoming contaminated. And when we drink the water, then we're going to get sick and have different diseases. Think about that. That's so important to each and every one of us. Each of us are Americans. We should all be treated the same. I get very upset when they get there and they forget who they are and who they're representing. Except for one person, I have to give it to Senator Schumer. Senator Schumer thought nothing to come here for me. He was here, and we had the controller, and we had a wonderful. They were all here for me. Because they didn't think, that I was too small. They came because they believed in it. And some things they do now with my own party, I don't hear about it. They don't help me. But you know what? The people know. And I love people, and that's what I'm going to do. I will continue to do this as long as the Lord allows me to. That's more important to me than anything else. And that's what we need to learn to do as Americans. We are Americans. They should not hold up this money because it's going to help people who truly need it. I have people who call me all the time or come here for things that they need. And they come to me for any and everything because they know if I can help them, I'm going to. And I'm going to get the help from the town that I need. So that's the way they should think about it. Come visit sometimes. Come look on the ground and see what's really happening.
Yeah, but that's perfect.
It's funny.
Think it can be said better.
I was thinking about it the other day. What are some of the answers to the lack of empathy and the lack of compassion? And I thought of something as simple as every time you walk through a door and you've got that door open, take a look behind you and see if someone else is going to follow you, and hold the darn door. Something that simple. I can't believe when I see it, somebody's walking into a they have automatic doors, but they're like in the library, and they hold the door open, they walk through and they just let it slam, and no consideration whatsoever, or even taking into account there may be somebody behind you that you just slammed the door in their face. It's something that simple.
on the micro level. But like you said, on the macro level, seeing policy that doesn't have the same result, like you said, leaving people kind of to the side because you didn't acknowledge them or maybe, kind of realize that their need was as immediate as it was like opening a door, know. So that is certainly an interesting point.
I think it boils down to living mindfully.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
I agree with you 100% on that. We should. For instance, we have some good kids here in this district, but they only look at the bad. Like, for instance, how would it have hurt televisions to come here and televise this so the kids could have seen it? Right. We had about 600 people here that came, and there was no room for them. But it would have been so great because people are saying, why didn't they televise it? Was that important? That's history. It's never happened before. Yeah. And it won't happen again. Can you imagine the whole plaza being named for me? And then so we do a lot of things here, and the town helps me. On the 21st, we're going to have our breast cancer forum. And not only breast cancer, we do everything for anyone. It's on the 21st, and it's going to be virtual. We have to do it virtual. But hopefully soon we'll be able to go back to having things live. But we do a lot of things for our people because it was never exposed to them before. Senator Schumer was able to push through for us. June 19th, we have that program.
Yep, June 19th.
We have what else? The Black History program. That's when I first found out that they were going to name the plaza for me was in 2020. We didn't have time to do it because of the pandemic, so we finally got it done, which was wonderful. And it's just great. Well, we have lots of great programs that we do so people can learn. And I would love for them to be able to do it. The town does have it on the website. They put it on the website and they put it on YouTube. But to open it up so people can see it. I just don't understand why Channel 12 didn't come here, and they don't realize that how much money this community spends,
definitely
to them. And
the main hub, transit
soon.
Hub.
They're going to feel it soon because we're really going to work on that. Channel 12 never came. Not one TV station came.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that is a shame, like you said.
But not surprising. It's not very surprising, though, is it?
No, it's not.
No,
local media, I know, showed up, and I know, again, a lot of folks definitely covered it, and I know Newsday was there, and it's important, like you said, to have local journalism, because sometimes the networks are maybe chasing some big national story or something else that maybe is a little flashier, but knowing, like you said, the significance of the moment, knowing all your service, and knowing the other just political bigwigs who are there in a political season, we should say that it seems a little bit odd, like you said, that they weren't having someone to cover out here on Long Island. But like I said, that is the past, but definitely it is to know that like I said, you're still running for the future, and you're still obviously the member in the present. So I guess I'm not sure how much time. We only have a few more moments here, and I know we're going to speak to the acting district attorney, D.A. Smith, in a few moments. But I know obviously there's a lot that's still being done around issues like housing equity and policy, and obviously also things like police reform, I guess. But what do you tell voters, maybe on those issues, or just I guess in general, that they don't know already about you, and what's going to be done in the future, knowing that there is still a lot of fights ahead, basically.
Well, I'm going to continue to fight for them as I always have. I will never stop doing what I'm doing for them, and if they come to me, I'll do my very best to make sure that I can help. And I'm certainly, the one thing that's bothering me most of all is the water and the sewage. And no one's looking at that for us, because we could do the same as in Michigan, where the water is so bad that the people have to buy water. I know in Apalachicola, Florida, the same thing is happening. All of us, it's not going to just be the African American or Hispanics are the ones who are, but it's going to be everybody. They're going to get the same, as we are. So let's work together. And all those folk in Washington, D.C., please stop fighting and work together and do what's best for all of us in this country.
I hope they heard you. I hope they heard you.
I hope so, too.
Loud and clear. We'll definitely bring up your points, when we speak to the other members of elected officials and members of the Congress, as time goes on. But like I said, I think, your perspective is certainly invaluable, and certainly we really do appreciate your time.
Yes, we definitely do.
Thank you so much again. We hope to have you on another point. And like I said, certainly I know you have a lot of events there you can find on the Town of Hempstead website. And I'm not sure if you're too active on social media platforms, but of course they can always contact your office if they have interest. I know in different community events that you're sponsoring for your constituents, of course, right?
Well, I do. And not only I do have one, I have my own as Councilwoman Dorothy Goosby. You can go into that one and you can see things. We're very cautious with that because some people put things in there that are not true, and we try to keep it clean. So, and we give a lot of information out to, the public because we want them involved. This is what it is. It's for them.
Definitely.
I work for them because, I could go someplace and just relax, but I can't, So.
I don't see you going anywhere to relax. I just, not with your record.
Thank you again for all your time. We really appreciate it and look forward to speaking with you again. Have a great weekend.
Thank you very much. So right now, we're very happy to be joined by Nassau County's acting district attorney, Joyce Smith. District Attorney Smith was appointed as the county's top prosecutor on June 8th, following the former DA Madeline Singas being confirmed by the state legislature as a judge on New York State's Court of Appeals. District Attorney Smith joined the Nassau DA's office in 2018 and had been the executive assistant district attorney for the Community Relations Division, overseeing 5 crucial program offices. She previously served as the staff attorney in the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights Office, the executive director for the Bronx Family Justice Center, as well as the assistant commissioner and deputy chief of staff for the mayor's office to combat domestic violence. And District Attorney Joyce Smith, are you there?
I am.
Thank you for joining us. I'm sure you're a busy person too.
In addition to all those accolades and that, obviously those bona fides legally, you are, I believe, still an active adjunct professor at Hofstra, but also right here at our own Nassau Community College. So, of course, we had to give ourselves a pat on the back for that one.
It has been, yes, that's such a joy. And working with Bob Costello and the other folks in our criminal justice department has been a real pleasure. We've got great students at NCC and looking forward to seeing some of them join us in the office and throughout the legal profession.
Yep, that sounds great. And I know there's a good pipeline in terms of the internship programs and things like that through the school and through the DA's office. And we can talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But let's start, I think, maybe kind of big picture in terms of you kind of taking over at the DA's office and making history basically during historic times, being, as mentioned, the first African-American woman to hold this very important position.
Yes, it has been a journey and an interesting few months. I can say it's been adventurous and at times just a whirlwind of activity. But the good thing is we have an amazing team of executives and, the leadership in the office has sustained the same pace. And we haven't seen throughout our transition any significant changes in the way that we operate. But we are doing our best to keep up with all the demands and the pressures of the changes in the criminal justice system outside of our office. So I've been supported by some wonderful people in our office.
Wow.
That makes a lot of sense. But maybe, and we'll go on to maybe more of the pressing issue. I know there's a couple of things that, you've been in the press for, pushing for in terms of paying jurors more and things like that. But maybe just to stay on that, in terms of maybe what you even tell some of your students here at Nassau Community College, maybe just the significance, the importance, again, of someone like you, with your background and your own, perspective, I think coming from Hollis, Queens, if I'm correct, and being in this position, what that means, in the light of a lot of kind of, discussion about equity racially and, kind of gender-based in the legal profession and also criminal justice as a whole, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges that we often find in marginalized communities or communities that have felt left out of the discussion with policymakers and lawmakers in the criminal justice arena is that we don't always think of the impact of our decisions on those who will feel that impact the most. And those are the people who have to leave work late and get up early and take buses and trains to jobs that sometimes are very stressful and difficult for them. And they've got to balance home life and careers and childcare and all the things that we all struggle with in day-to-day living. But to increase the pressures that those folks may face and experience because of crime, because of violence in their homes or in their streets, in the alleyways outside of their buildings, that's a real concern that residents in the neighborhoods where I grew up in Hollis, Queens, which is, as far as demographics are concerned, predominantly African American, working class community. But everyone there that, grew up on my block or in my neighborhood wanted to live in a safe neighborhood. We didn't want to see violence or gang activity or drug sales on our corners. So balancing out the concerns that the average citizen has with safety, as well as a fair and equitable criminal justice process, those are two not necessarily competing values. And that's what I've been striving to make sure that I keep an eye on as district attorney, but throughout my legal career.
Yeah, that's great to hear from someone in your position. We all saw in the last, I guess we could say 30 years, that idea that we had a national program that was titled The War on Poverty. And a lot of the result was it became a war on the poor.
Right.
The way that some of the laws were written, everybody said, oh, this is good, until you really get down to the nitty gritty and you say, you know what? Right. Yeah, this is good if you're making $100,000 a year and you're in control of your situation. But this is not so good if none of those conditions exist. We had a discussion with the police commissioner about when the bail law first came out.
Yeah.
And a lot of Long Island is still up in arms about it. But we did come to the idea that, I remember saying to the commissioner, this bail reform law didn't come into effect because somebody woke up one morning and say, hey, I got a good idea. Let's just let all the prisoners out of jail. It came about because the correctional department was, blatantly. There was the one story, the flashpoint was the kid who was accused of stealing a backpack and wound up in Rikers Island for 2 years. And they had forgotten they'd forgotten he was even there.
Yeah.
And I think the people that scream about these bail laws aren't taking all of the people. That was just one case. How many others?
Yeah, and that was the tragedy that we in the criminal justice system, all of the practitioners and members of the courtroom work group even want to avoid the Khalif Browders of the world. He was thrust into a system that in Rikers Island was not perfect and had a lot of internal issues with regard to administration and safety and security. But for someone that young to languish as long as he did, without his family being able to make and if I recall correctly, it was $1,000 bail, without his family being able to have him released on bail. And for the duration of time that he was in, it was upwards of 3 years on what amounted to an ultimate dismissal. The challenge for us and those of us who make these decisions, whether it's a judge or a prosecutor or a defense attorney, is to make sure that we don't forget that there are people behind these docket numbers and people behind these arrest numbers. The family that was impacted in the Browder case, it didn't just resonate with him, because when he came home and his family attempted to bring him back into and transition him back into his neighborhood, he didn't survive. He didn't survive the stress and the trauma that he had experienced and ultimately took his own life. We need to avoid that. And that tragedy can be avoided if we make smarter decisions about what we do with each case that we handle, and treating each person as an individual, each case as an individual, is critically important.
Yeah, right. They're not numbers. Absolutely. They're not algorithms. They're not ideas. Exactly. They're people.
People with families, and again, the lasting impact, obviously the concerns of recidivism. And I think we'll kind of go there now in terms of, I know a program that your office, I believe it was, at first kind of thought and, kind of constructed under the previous administration, Singus's tenure. But in terms of trying to deal with pre-arraignment diversion programs and, restorative justice, I know people talk about bail reform, that one specific kind of piece of legislation that passed a few years ago, but there are also been other bail reforms. I know there's the Less is More Act, I believe, that was authored by the lieutenant governor, which got signed recently, and other things like Bill was saying that, I get that people can say that there might be an overcorrection, but it would be a bit naive, I would think, maybe from even it sounds like your perspective or those looking objectively, that there wasn't some issue that needed some kind of addressing through social policies or through legislation. So can you talk about maybe that pre-arraignment diversion program and I guess, restorative justice in a sense?
Sure. Sure. Restorative justice is based in the notion that we have multiple facets of the criminal justice system, the process that is dependent upon an integrated community input, the victim's input or the person who was victimized or experienced the crime, and the offender's ultimate restoration and release. So having those three components wrapped around the criminal incident and being aware of how each of those three components are integrated and will be affected by the criminal incident is the most important reason that we have to pursue restorative justice policies. The pre-arraignment diversion program that my office started, and it was under Madeline Singus's tenure that we started advancing this notion that we can't arrest our way out of all of the problems that people face, the underlying root causes of crime, and we can't address all of those cases that come into our courts with a sentence of incarceration or perhaps the most the harshest sentence that the law would allow. So we have to find where the middle ground is, and we have to be smarter in our practices. The way to do that is to assess the needs and the underlying causes of the criminal incident that the offender may be experiencing so that we can address those needs, so that we can avoid their recidivism, so that we can make sure they're able to transition back into their home lives, into their families, and into their jobs and schools. So pre-arraignment diversion is designed to start that process before they enter the court system. So before the case even enters court, at the incident date or at the moment of their arrest, we give them opportunities to either connect with treatment programs or alternatives to incarceration, supportive services, so that we're now addressing the underlying cause of their crime rather than simply housing them in a facility that we really don't have space or finance to afford them. So I think the idea of having, and I'll add that since the pandemic, we've experienced a huge slowdown in every aspect of the criminal justice system, not the least of which are desk appearance tickets, because once our criminal justice reform package was passed by our legislators in 2020, we needed to change the way that most people encounter the criminal justice system. So the legislators decided most cases will qualify for a desk appearance ticket as opposed to an arrest and custody by the police. What those desk appearance tickets do is, you may be familiar, will give a person an appointment to come back to court at a later date and answer for their offense. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we saw that slowdown amount to an 8,000 case backlog in our unarraigned desk appearance tickets. Wow. So there are roughly 8,000 people in our county who don't know the outcome of those cases, whether they've been victimized or they're a person who has been accused of the crime. Right. So we had to figure out what to do about those 8,000 cases, and pre-arraignment diversion is a small step towards getting that case number reduced and having those folks hopefully never come into our court system. If they successfully complete the conditions of their release, their cases will be dismissed, and we will seal their cases so that they don't have the criminal record to follow them.
Right.
Yep, that's a very important thing. I believe like ACDs and other things in terms of folks, especially where we talk about things like the opioid crisis. And we just spoke with Councilwoman Goosby, the senior councilwoman over at the town of Hempstead, and talking about like the Narcan program and, the idea of, trying to treat especially issues like addiction as a public health crisis, not necessarily just as a law enforcement issue. Of course, there's that side. And to that point, maybe even you could speak to the fact that, the county, I know, was a part of litigation against some of the big pharmaceutical companies that, wound up resulting, I think, in a kind of settlement that I believe the Attorney General, Letitia James, kind of is overseeing. But seeing again that, like we said, dealing with the root causes and not necessarily just, to use maybe kind of a term, warehousing, problems in a sense. Do you think, again, that, kind of, I guess, is the mission of things like that, that pre-diversion?
Exactly. Right. Pre-arraignment diversion, alternatives to incarceration. We can't arrest ourselves out of these problems. Simply arresting the person and not treating their underlying disorder or their issue is just going to have them return back to the same behaviors that led them into jail or into the arrest and into the criminal justice system. It isn't a cure-all. We need to have buy-in from the individuals who we're making these programs available to. They have to be willing. These are voluntary programs. So a person, once they've chosen an alternative path, we will help and support them. And absolutely, if a person is suffering from an opioid addiction or some other clinical condition that requires some more intensive care, mental health issues, those are the things that we need to have funding for, but we also need to have community-based support. And it isn't simply, as I mentioned before, with restorative justice, it's not simply the government stepping in and figuring out these problems. It's the community buying in and supporting the rehabilitation and holistic health of the individual who's been involved in a crime.
Yeah, right. I'm really interested in, now you as the acting district attorney, to me, and I'm no expert on anything, but I would think I would think it would be kind of like the cat seat to sit in, because you're not worried about getting elected next term,
right?
And so you can pretty much take out your magic wand and say, "Hey, I'm the DA, and this is what I want to do." And without really, I mean, you're always going to get blowback. There's no way that someone says something in politics and everyone agrees. That's not going to happen.
Right.
But I and I see some of the things you do. As far as I'm concerned, they're pretty gutsy.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, no, they really are, and it almost makes me feel like, gee, I wish it was always this way.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the reality is we have elected officials who are representatives. They are there to represent the will of the whole, whether it is in a county or other state seat or federal.
Yes.
But the sense that I got from being a community relations division head is that we have to listen to the people we're serving before we make decisions that affect their lives.
Yeah.
And so from an internal basis, we've assessed the needs that our staff has to deal with the pandemic, to deal with the backlog in their cases. They've been working incredibly hard for the last 2 years, and trying to reduce the backlog and deal with the effects of discovery and bail reform. But the needs that the staff that we've tried to address is to make sure that they're supported, that we have enough people, enough hands on deck to do the hard work, and that they have the equipment and the tools to be able to work effectively. But the same is true of outside of our office. The communities that we serve don't want us to approach crime the same way that we approached it 20 or 30 years ago.
No,
when I started in this business 25 years ago, we didn't yet fully understand the implications of the Rockefeller drug laws. We didn't fully understand the implications of even our omnibus crime bill in 1994. Once we saw the changes and the impact of those laws, we had to respond differently. So my hope is that even, in this position, that I can inspire the next administration and those who are similarly situated in other county offices, that we have to listen first. And once we listen and open our ears, then we can open our mouths and respond in a more systematic way that's responsive, but it's also incorporating people's needs and views.
Yeah, well,
that's very important, of course. And let's just remind our listeners, they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College, with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully still joined by the acting district attorney of Nassau County, Joyce Smith. I didn't want to cut you off there, Bill.
That's okay. On the way into the station today to come to do the interview, I heard a news story on CBS Radio. The Manhattan Correctional Facility at one time was housing 700. I don't think it was made for a capacity of 200, but now it's actually down to 75, and they're eventually going to close it. I think this is progress. I was wondering how you feel about that.
Yeah, I think the idea that even in our state, we've seen a 48% reduction in the numbers of incarcerated people throughout the state over the past 2 decades. So in roughly a generation, we've been able to reduce the numbers of people who are incarcerated and look for alternative measures to address the criminality that they've been involved with. That's not an easy lift, and it isn't, there's no one-size-fits-all solution. So even if we close facilities, correctional facilities, we have to house people who are who are suffering from mental health issues. We have to treat people who are suffering from substance use disorder. We have to make sure that the community-based resources are available to the people that we're releasing back into our communities. Otherwise, we're creating the same cycles that we've seen for decades.
Yeah.
Of course.
When we previously interviewed Madeline Singas, we were very surprised at how many things the DA's office actually does. We had no
victim services.
Yeah, we had no idea.
Advisory councils,
that,
I know, are
that
born,
all
like
these
you said,
tentacles went out into the community to do, which is great. We really didn't know. You got a full plate, that's for sure. But we also want to interview you after the new DA gets in, and you can sit on this side of the line with us, and we can look at what they're doing.
Oh yes, that would be my pleasure.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, a little bit less of the spotlight facing your direction. I'm sure it wouldn't feel too bad, but definitely, there's a lot of those issues, and appreciate you, kind of giving your thoughts on those needs for, again, like you said, some more kind of holistic approaches to law enforcement and prosecutions as well. But I guess maybe just to come back, and like I said, I know you're talking about those advisory councils and getting community input, but what about those other folks, maybe in terms of, we see a lot of issues with scams. We see, obviously domestic violence we talked about with the predecessor, DA Singas, and, dealing with all these issues during the pandemic, child abuse, folks who seriously, have, again, breached the line of, obviously, legal norm or
decency,
anything,
decency.
Close to decency. Yeah. Exactly. So, also the white collar folks, again, what is being done though, to focus maybe less on those, small fish, for lack of a better term, and more of those kind of large cases, using resources maybe somewhat redirected.
Right. We've had some large-scale investigations, and we are so grateful to our partners in federal law enforcement who have partnered with us and supported some of the major initiatives that our office has carried out. For the last several months, we've conducted whether it's requiring search warrants to investigate locations. Some of the scams that you mentioned have been particularly troubling because we've seen this uptick in shoplifting occurrences where, and it's really become widespread throughout the nation. But we see these groups who are going into stores and either vandalizing the stores or stealing large sums of items, and those thefts are directly impacting consumers. We also have negatively impacting consumers, like I said, across the country, but also impacting our economy because these businesses are either reducing their stock or some are closing as a result. Mm-hmm. We also have
losing sales tax revenue.
Exactly. And the scams that are perpetrated against our senior citizens are incredibly troubling because those are among our most vulnerable in our populations, yet they're experiencing either phone scams or individuals who are engaging in identity theft, calling them and pretending to be a family member or a loved one. Those are the types of crimes that I think hit at the core of our quality of life throughout our county. And one of the most effective ways that we've tried to undertake in crime prevention is educating people and making sure that these communities, these store owners, et cetera, are all fully aware of the measures that we can undertake to protect and prevent the next victim. But it's truly necessary that we educate more people so that they are not the victim of the next scam.
Yeah,
definitely. And in addition to the scams, another thing that we talked about with, again, the former DA was, especially the upticks at that point in hate crimes. Has that somewhat leveled off, from your perspective? Is that still something I know, and we've talked to law enforcement about, obviously, as a priority, but, what can you say about that? Hate towards, maybe Asian brothers and sisters or Jewish brothers and sisters or Muslim, etc.
Yeah, it's so hard to say because those are among our most underreported crimes, and some of the crimes that we experience where we have high rates of either failure to report or we don't have a lot of reports that are able to be sustained because we lack evidence. Those are the individuals that we definitely need to reach and make sure that they have an opportunity to receive resources that are sometimes outside of the criminal justice system. We don't have all the answers, and if we can't identify a perpetrator or if we don't have someone who can be held accountable, perhaps the incident is not rising to the level of a criminal offense, we can nonetheless try to educate the community. We go into schools and try to educate young people about tolerance and about an appreciation for other cultures that are different than their own. Those acts of encouragement and those acts of community engagement, we find can do the most in preventing the next offense from occurring. But it really is difficult work because it requires a thorough approach that is inclusive of not just law enforcement, but also community-based resources.
Of course. And then just maybe the last thing here to finish, in the few moments that we have left here with you, is that initiative, or rather the push that you're kind of, rallying behind and advocating for in regards to jurors being paid more money to participate in, being willing selected jurors, at $15 an hour, $140 a day, kind of get more lines with the minimum wage at the state level. Can you tell us why that's so important, and why that's somewhere you're kind of planting your flag in the time that you have left in office?
Sure. This is it's not a novel issue, but it's one that I don't think many people think about. The issue with regard to the jurors is that we have people who are asked to serve our criminal justice system, our legal system, and civil juries, et cetera, and they're paid $40 a day to do that. If we looked at any other entity, whether it's a business owner or some other public service initiative that requires a person to leave work, to find childcare, to pay for their own transportation, to pay for their own lunch, and we have to do those services through a subpoena. You're required to do this through a jury summons, rather. And so they don't have an option but to serve for $40 a day. That's about $5 an hour. We're not only underpaying them, we're paying them less than the federal poverty line says that we should pay them. So the least we can do, not only to encourage people to serve, not only to give them something more than a token of appreciation for their service, which can last for days or weeks, sometimes months, we need to make sure that they are adequately compensated. And it cuts at the core of diversifying our juries. We don't simply want jury service to be limited to people who can afford it. It should include the working class person, the mom with 3 jobs and 2 kids. We need to make sure that everybody is able to serve.
And how much blowback do you think, or are you getting by advocating your position? Are there
personally?
Just in general. Just in general,
I think usual resistance to any fiscal initiative is we can't afford it. The usual response. It's almost a knee-jerk response.
Right. Depends on who we're giving the money to. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. How can we afford this? But I'll tell you that we find ways to afford every single criminal justice initiative that we've either increased funding for over the course of the last 2 decades, or we search out new ways to become more fiscally responsible to our taxpayers. So if we're asking these same taxpayers to fund our system, we're asking them now to serve in the system as jurors, the least we can do is compensate them, and our legislators can find a way. Yeah, I know and have full faith they can.
Yeah, it just seems like a no-brainer, but but again, being in politics, you're always going to have a detractor. I mean, just looking at that. Jon and I talked about on the show so many times. We've been talking about a $15 minimum wage now for 30 years, 25, 30. And I have constantly said that by the time we're done with this conversation, $15 is going to be a moot point, as it is now. Right. Anybody making $15 an hour is in trouble.
Cost of living in New York City.
Unless they have, and then the old joke where, a reporter comes out and says, hey, the Labor Department just announced there's 100,000 new jobs in the arena. And a guy puts his hand up in the back and he says, oh, that's very true. I have 3 of them.
Wow. No, exactly. I think to your point, Bill, and to your point, obviously, District Attorney, that civic duty shouldn't be a privilege, whether it's voting or whether it's jury duty or anything what related. It's something that is a responsibility, and you can't have it be a responsibility without it being equitable to access the process. So that certainly is important. And just to maybe clarify and to close out, so that would be something, and you're pushing again for potentially finding maybe a sponsor. There isn't an active bill in either House legislature, is there? Or is that something you're looking to see, hopefully someone kind of create when the session gets called back to Albany?
Exactly. We'd like to see this picked up as a legislative action for the next session. I think it's important that we move quickly, and I hope that our legislators who are inclined to think about this as an important issue for their constituents will, if they have questions or they need further information, we're happy to meet and talk with them.
That's important. So, okay. Thank you. We're very grateful again for your time. And
we can't thank you enough. Yeah, really.
Thank you.
But in any event,
good stuff, Bill.
The clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to move on out of here. We thank you for joining us and remind you that you can catch this week's Long Island News every Friday at 3 o'clock right here on 90.3 WHPC.